In this episode, Dr. Jeff Porter, Mark Hotchkin, and I speak with three people that help their organizations make decisions with data. How can you use the data that you are mining to build better experiences for our consumers and fans? Welcome back to another episode of Sport Media and Tech. Today we're here to talk about big data and analytics. I could not be more excited to introduce to you three people that I've met through my journey. And as normal, we have Dr. Jeff Porter and Mark Hotchkin co-moderating. And so why don't we go ahead and get started and introduce you to Michelle Stenger with UCF Athletics. How are you doing?
Hey, Keel, I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to chat with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And we also have Michael Rust from the Nashville Predators. How are you doing, Michael?
Hey, Keel, how's it going? Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah. How's Nashville?
Nashville is good. We're just, staying busy here and still just, getting ready for, some NHL news and getting back to normal.
Yeah, I hear you there. And last but not least, we have Michael Farris. So Michael and I met back at UCF Athletics. There's a lot of commonalities here around UCF. All three speakers will share here in just a moment. But Michael Ferris is with the Country Music Association. How you doing?
Doing well. Excited to be on and talking a little bit back of my sports industry experience. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah, well, what we do to get started is, because of the current landscape, the students are asking, how do they prepare and how do they take next steps in their careers? So I'd like to ask you a little bit about your journey of how you've gotten to your role today. So Michelle, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, so I am from Cincinnati originally, so I went to Miami of Ohio. I have to specify that now that I live down here in Florida. Went there for my undergrad, got my degree in business, specifically in marketing. And then right out of college, I was lucky enough to start off in the sports world with a job in ticket sales with the Cincinnati Bengals. I was there for about a year and a half, and then moved into the fan experience side with the University of Cincinnati in their athletics department. And then following that, got a job at the University of Illinois in basically the middle of nowhere, Illinois, Champaign, and was there for 3 years. And that's kind of where I started on the data analytics side of my career path. And then that finally got me ready to take on the opportunity here at UCF. I've been here for about 2 years and loving it down here in sunny Orlando.
Yeah. Michelle, when you first took the job at UCF, we were able to connect and grab coffee at First Watch. I was really excited for the program because of some of the ideas that you shared. And then I've also just heard really great things from students that are going through the program that work with you. Sam, who's actually TA for this course, has learned so much from you. So I know she'd appreciate me giving you a shout out. So thank you. And then lastly, I do have to do this. I haven't done this. This was in the back of one, but I'm a huge Knight fan. So this was for when game day came by. It was Mr. Committee. How many wins does it take? But yeah, basically we realized that although this sign's pretty, it wasn't necessarily the best to get on TV because it's hard to see from far away. But learning lessons. You got to think like a billboard if you want to get on game day. So, all right. Well, hey, thanks for being here, Michelle, and Michael Rust. What about your journey?
Thanks, Keel. So I'm originally from the St. Louis area. I did my undergrad at Murray State University in Western Kentucky. Got my degree in business management there. After that, went down to Orlando, did my master's in the BOSS program. And my start in the sports industry came through networking with alumni of the BOSS program. Michael Farris, he worked at the Aspire Group. That was my first stop out of college, working at Miami, Ohio. Kind of in a database role there for, outsourced ticket sales, kind of analytics space, helping them with digital marketing and email marketing, reporting, that type of things. And then joined the Preds in 2016 when another alum, JT Louviere, took over the business strategy team there. So I've been at the Preds for the last 4 years, kind of overseeing a lot of our single game strategies and helping kind of build our data infrastructure up in here in Nashville.
Yeah, and Michael, we met when you were helping with the project with IOA, Insurance Office America,
Yep.
and immediately I was impressed just with your professionalism and how you presented. I remember coming to the business building too, and sitting in on the presentation of what your team put together. So it's been awesome to see you continue to grow and find new opportunities in your career. So thank you for taking the time. And Michael Farris, how you're both in Nashville, right?
We're practicing social distancing right now.
Yeah.
Well
Hard. We're
said.
lunch buddies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was your journey like, Mr. Farris?
Originally from Louisville, Kentucky, and I went to undergrad at Northern Kentucky University. I went to a lot of directional schools because I didn't know where I was heading. So I got my undergrad in sports business. That was a dad joke. I apologize, guys. Got my degree in sports business and started working at a PR firm that's where I got my first taste of working kind of in more of a consulting space and working on research and strategy for them. I went to grad school at the University of Central Florida at DeVos. And from there was introduced to Bernie Mullen, who was the founder of the Aspire Group. The Aspire Group's a ticket marketing, sales, and service agency. And I was brought on to put some formal structure around their consulting and research department. And I led that division for about 5 years. I was able to work with over 70 different brands in 7 different countries on a wide variety of topics within the sports industry. Recently left there. I've been now at the Country Music Association here in Nashville for 2 years, where I recently transitioned to take on a full-time direction leading our business intelligence and strategy pieces, as well as working on some other strategic initiatives in a new department. So really excited about where everything's going.
The whole topic that we're here to discuss centers around big data and analytics. And, we were talking before we started recording, and one of the things was identified is, some people are at the forefront of starting the process within an organization and others are midway. So could each of you share kind of where you are in terms of using big data and analytics within your organization?
Yeah, so I've been at UCF, I think, like I mentioned, for almost exactly 2 years now. Actually, May 1st will be my 2-year anniversary. And when I was hired, my position was brand new. So Danny White, our athletics director, set out a strategic plan, and different than some other places that, I've seen actually uses that strategic plan and makes decisions based on that. And one of the things that they were looking for was to have that actual data-driven decision making. So basically, I started from scratch, and I would say, if you're looking in the crawl, walk, run phase, we're probably, I'll say maybe in the like walking-ish, crawl to walk start. So we partnered with Core, a company, to give us our data warehouse, as well as a ticketing analytics solution, and soon our sponsorship inventory management solution. So that was a big step there. But like I said, definitely in the beginning phases.
Yeah, Michelle, I think I'm going to follow up to everyone after, but what you've really identified is that there's so much opportunity still in the space. So I want the students to listen to what each of you are sharing now really carefully, because a lot of organizations are just starting in at the forefront, and there's so much still yet to be done with that data. So Michael Rust, where are the predators right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the crawl, walk, run analogy. That's what I was going to use before that. Some days we're walking, some days we're jogging. It just depends. And I think that's, kind of where a lot of teams are. Being at the Preds for 4 years, we kind of took a different path when JT and I both started of really kind of refocusing and getting back to basics from a data standpoint, and kind of establishing a strong foundation in the data space. So onboarding, SSB, another data warehouse company to really integrate sources, standing up a new CRM system, those types of things. And buying into Predators has been great. So, we built that foundation from the ticket sales standpoint and really understanding those revenue streams. And then last year to expanding our team from 3 to 5, adding 2 new entry-level analysts on board because the organization saw the impact we're able to make across the spectrum of marketing and corporate partnerships and give us more bandwidth so that way we could essentially, help service those other teams and provide them with opportunities to generate more additional revenue. So that's kind of where we've seen growth. And, we're fortunate to be at a company that buys into the data as an overall driver in decision making.
Yeah, you have such a unique setup. I had the opportunity to catch a game when I was last in Nashville, and you're just set up right downtown, right near all the honky tonks. So you can go and just enjoy the music, enjoy the food, and walk right into a game. And you see people going both directions, from whether they're going to the music to the game or from the game to the music. And so it is a really special experience. And even what you've done internally to set that up. And so later I want to ask about what you've learned from the data around because of your unique location. But how about you? I'm going to have to say Mr. Farris so that we don't get confused with our Michaels.
So formal. If we're going to use the crawl, walk, run analogy, I would say we're practicing belly time, trying to figure out how to get our limbs moving. And CMA, for some of the students on the phone, might be country music fans, may not be, but they might think about our brand as TV shows with the CMA Awards or maybe with our Fest TV or Country Christmas. But our heart is a trade association. We have 7,500 members within the industry that we serve on a daily basis, trying to lift up our genre and really expand it globally. So we have a live event component, we have TV, and we have this trade association piece. And we are just now really launching on board with SSB, getting a project going to start to create our data warehouse and pool all these resources together, start to build out some CRM modules that make sense for us internally. But really our big goal is understanding a way to enhance our messaging more and to get more one-on-one consumption to drive the passion for our genre. And whether that might be CMA consumed or with digital service providers or through other labels and artists. So we're kind of at a strategy and aggregation phase and starting to push forward.
Yeah, in the follow-up to that, because each of you have kind of been touching on where your organization is, we're approaching all of these new, technologies or just strategies that people are using. And so when we look at data warehouses, we look at machine learning and AI, we look at blockchain, IoT, visual data analytics, audience data, predictive analytics. So I know just shared a lot, but where I'm going with this is that what skills are important for students right now to get ahead of, so that as they graduate, they can have some of the skill sets to support the walking, the running and the jogging, or I'm sorry, the walking, the jogging and the running. I did that in the wrong order. And sometimes the organizations do too. But Michelle, what do you think?
Well, I think in terms of technical skills, I think, the technical ability will come as long as you're willing to put in the work to learn it. Things like the statistics, the math, the coding, communication, being able to communicate these things that you're finding, technology, being able to use these things to get you those answers. All of those things can be taught, and heck, I'm still learning a lot of them. But honestly, one of the things that I think is most important, one of the most important qualities to have is curiosity. Asking the questions, why are our fans leaving at halftime? How can we get more people to come to games instead of watching on TV? When is the best time for consumers to view our advertisements? Questions like those, that's what causes us to dig deeper and get to the root of the root of the problem instead of throwing a Band-Aid solution on top of it and hoping that it sticks. Curiosity is what solves the problems, and that's what data analytics is all about.
Yeah, we're on the exact same page. That was going to be my answer too, because that is a huge part of just being an analyst, right? Is just being able to understand and just want to keep digging when, even though it feels like you hit a brick wall. If I'm giving something else, I think just being able to have that desire to take something to the next level. I think sometimes when you're doing analysis, it's easy to just do just the straight, simple, here's what it is, but it's being able to go above and beyond when you're giving your analysis to get that deeper level, to figure out that deeper insight. It might take a little bit more work, but having that, that ability to just go to the next level without being asked, that's a huge thing. And echoing Michelle too, the technical abilities, all those can come, but having the initiative to learn those things on your own definitely is a huge thing to set students apart, because a lot of times that formal education isn't necessarily out there. It's all going to be self-taught. Once you get into a place where you have the data sets and the tools and things like that available, it's being able to learn quickly and adapt that's going to really help you out and set you apart.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, because I think when you look at the business intelligence, the data side, especially when you go back to our last conversation point of some people are really early on, hard skills will be taught, the tacit skills will be acquired. But what you often want to look for in an individual is how can they communicate and talk to people that are, one, not technical, and two, may not fully support an idea. So I would really encourage students to start to explore the strategy around why people build out a data architecture. What was the birthing point of it at organizations? What were the pitfalls? Why did they not win or succeed? And if you can start to communicate that back to your stakeholders, you're going to win. You're going to find the opportunities to build hard skills, and you're going to get people on board. I think that's often the challenge. I look back at the Aspire group when we tried to, and Michael can hop in here on this, but when we tried to go out and implement CRM and data strategies at colleges, often it was a big picture issue. They didn't get on board with the messaging and marketing. So that positioning and that salesmanship when you're working in this type of role is just as important on what you can do from an output angle.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I talk to a lot of people who do hiring, and I think you all touched on it, that the skills can be taught, but they want to see people who are coming into the industry understanding the bigger picture, understanding the kind of the basics, how it fits into the other parts, because this is the kind of topic that really has a lot of tentacles, right? It hits a lot of parts of the organization. It's not just in one kind of silo. It hits everything. So you need to understand how things function at kind of a higher level. My question is, you talked about the different stages of development y'all are in implementing this, but I think we always look for different organizations or people in the space that have kind of inspired us to are doing really well, or who do you look at? Like, I'm really curious what they're doing. So I'd like to know who or what organizations you guys look to for kind of inspiration, or think are implementing these kind of projects really well.
Yeah, Disney is one of the top organizations that comes to mind for me, especially now that I live here in Orlando, the happiest place on earth, right? So, not only am I a big fan of their work as a consumer, I've been watching tons of Disney Plus at night, but also as a professional. I recently actually had the really, really cool opportunity to participate in a Disney Institute session, and they talked about using data analytics in decision making. Basically, it just showed me what I already knew, that Disney is one of the absolute best at what they do. I got to meet a Disney industrial engineer who also happens to be a UCF alum, and a data scientist. And they both had solved these real world problems using data, using some of the exact same technologies that we've all heard of and maybe even use now, like Excel, Tableau, Python, just to name a few. So Disney's commitment to their guests is unrivaled by most, and they rely on data to continue to stay ahead of the game. So they're definitely one of the first ones that come to mind.
Yeah. For me, I love looking at other sports teams and just seeing what they're doing. That's a big thing that we try to do at the Preds, is just get out there and talk to other analytics departments and learn from them. So, they're all out there. Everybody's got ideas, and you can always pick or glean one thing that somebody's doing really well. And that's the great thing about analytics, is just, it could be a mindset, it could be a path. Somebody could just shine, give you one kind of golden nugget that gets you, sparks you, and helps you for your organization. A few that, I've always kind of admired, the Orlando Magic, obviously, are huge in the analytics space. And so they're great. From an NHL side, the Tampa Bay Lightning, we have a ton of respect for them, and we work closely with them, led by another DeVos grad, Chris Kamke. So, there's another one for students to reach out to. But those are two that I kind of look at as leaders in our space that, always do great work and are really have the respect of their organization and are really forward thinking in what they're putting out.
I love the example of the Lightning. Some other ones that I get really excited about are Major League Baseball advanced media, especially when you're wrapping in as many tentacles as they have and how they can concentrate that. And so at the league level, I think MLB and the NBA are just trendsetters. But I try to challenge myself to get out of sports in the entertainment space. And I get really fascinated by consumer packaged good companies and quick service restaurants. You look at McDonald's and Burger King, and they get into hypersensitive data wars where they're geofencing around each other's restaurants and doing different campaigns to motivate behavior. And so I think a lot of times there's a lot of cut and copy that happens in sports. And then when you look at the rivalries that are actually taking place inside geographic zones, you see a lot more innovation on getting that consumer mindset. So those are always fun to see.
So I want to follow up on something that Michelle, I think you said initially, is that seeing that Disney is one of the organizations that inspires you, right? To Mark's question. I want to know, and especially I think it would be helpful for the students to know, give me that one or two examples in which data actually drives a decision. Like, what are you actually using the data to decide? And all of you, it's always helpful to have that concrete example. I know how we use data here, but as an example, how many, attendant, how many people are coming to a game, depending on the weather, temperature, et cetera. What kind of decisions are you making using the data?
Yeah, so for UCF specifically, like we mentioned before in the crawl, walk, run thing, we are towards the beginning of that journey. But I will say, I know since I am in the marketing, housed in the marketing side of things, from that perspective, we will often look at things like where our fans are concentrated to come up with decisions of where we're going to go for a coach's tour. Which county do you want to go to? Let's look at where the fans are, that sort of thing. That's a kind of a simple way. And then again, from my marketing lens of being able to take a fan through the customer journey, right? So starting from maybe they bought a national championship shirt, and I'm sure I could start some arguments there with that whole thing. But maybe they bought a national championship shirt, but they live all the way out. We find out they live all the way out in Oregon. Okay, probably not going to buy a ticket to a game, right? So then can we use, but now knowing that data, we can then use that to try to cultivate them to be a donor. All these other kind of things. How can we get these people to come in and support UCF Athletics, not always just from a ticket sales perspective, but from other things?
Yeah, those are two great things. From my standpoint, I'm working a lot with single game sales, package sales, those types of things, and doing a lot of analytics around that. So, for us, it's, one of the biggest things in season is making pricing decisions, dynamic pricing, and looking at all kinds of data factors all the time of just understanding what demands are like, what are page views like, what are, run rates looking like, what's available inventory, those types of things, and just taking all that available data from different sources and kind of, combining it into one, factor to determine, is this a good decision to raise price? And then, by how much is it, what's kind of the risk reward of making a decision to go up versus staying pat and just kind of examining those factors. So, from the ticket sales side, it's infinite of things that you can use data to help you and look at where you can kind of drive those revenue decisions.
I think something that's a little abstract from ticketing is at CMA, we look a lot at on-demand streaming numbers. And so we can look at TV properties and understand impact on the artist. So we can talk about it from a marketing positioning point. One of the other things we get to do is we get to look at market level data. So to understand things like Cleveland, Ohio is actually the highest growth rate for streaming in the country genre. Well, how can we tackle that? How can we talk about that with our association members? How can we drive that? Or how July 4th is actually the largest streaming day for country music. So I think we're trying to pinpoint moments in the calendar from a trade association angle that we can start to educate others. Looking back on sports, one of the things I always challenge students with is when you have tools that Michelle and Michael and I are going to get to work with, you can do a lot of advanced methodologies and look at big data, but it doesn't have to be that complicated. Like going out and doing a survey, asking a couple of really good, solid questions, and just looking at correlations. You know, with Army Athletics back when I was with Aspire, we just noticed that people were more satisfied when they got to games earlier in the day. So we developed marketing campaigns and restructured game day activities to benefit that. And we put money behind it because we had 2 data points that made sense. So sometimes it's even just boiling it down to, if we have a problem, what are the 2 or 3 things we really need to solve? And how can we just line some data metrics to make sure that makes sense?
Yeah, you know, you described the different numbers that that can tell you things and really tell you stories and help you make decisions. And so I'm curious, you know, whether it's this landscape where, you know, fans are home and you're engaging them through digital means and cultivating relationships in that way, or whether they're in the stands, what are the numbers that tell you the biggest stories? And then, you know, how do you use those to make those decisions? Can you provide some examples?
Ticket sales is obviously a big one for us. So you're looking at numbers like revenue and tickets sold nearly every day. Another huge revenue stream for us comes from supporters and donors to the UCF Athletics programs. So whether it's people paying to sit in a premium area at a game or philanthropically donating money outside of tickets to support our programs and student athletes. So then you're looking at, you know, some sort of affinity data to see lookalikes and, okay, this person donated and took these actions, so let's find a lookalike audience then that gives these people a higher propensity to do the same. We also have money coming in from sponsorship dollars that our in-house sponsorship team works to sell and cultivate those relationships on a daily basis. You know, so that's another area. And then one other one that I'll touch on where we're looking to grow is also in the merchandise sales and licensing revenue. So I mentioned this before in the example about, you know, someone buying a national championship shirt and kind of starting that UCF fandom, starting that journey there. You know, every time someone uses our UCF Athletics marks, we get royalties from that. Every little bit counts and certainly starts to add up.
Yeah, you know, you talked about lookalike audiences, and I wanted to take a step back on that because last podcast we had Ryan Berger from Hyper, an influencer marketing company, on, and you can use those, you know, influencers and their reach and platform and partnerships with them to build lookalike audiences. So you can have micro influencers, or in your case, you can use data analytics to find specific audiences, but in a way to reach them that might be way more economical or more efficient than paying for it through another company. And that's what I wanted to, like, that was spot on. And I appreciate you sharing that, because one thing that I think the students really need to look at is how can they find creative ways to identify people to build that relationship with. And so, Michael, how is your organization using data?
Yeah, you know, Michelle touched on a ton of things there from a revenue standpoint. One thing that has been big for us this year is we've kind of expanded our team that has been understanding a lot more of the marketing analytics, doing a ton more with social media, and especially now, since we're not selling tickets, we're not doing the traditional concession sales and all those types of things. It's, you know, our organization and our management is really focused on how are we engaging with our fans and how many, you know, how valuable are those touches for us, because not only are we wanting to, you know, touch fans from our sake and really engage with them, you know, from our proprietary channels, but we also want to make sure that we're driving value to, you know, our corporate partners who are having, you know, their own challenging business times, but, you know, using our brand to still shine a light on what they're doing. So, you know, using things as impressions, engagements, those types of things, and really tracking that. You know, our sales and service teams have still been very active in this time, doing a ton of outbound efforts to just check in and do those kind of wellness checks. And so everything that we're logging from a CRM standpoint to measure our outbound and inbound activity that we're still generating, all that is still, you know, showing our exec team that, yeah, while times are tough right now for everybody, we're still have an engaged fan base that's passionate about our brand, and you know, just keeping those, you know, those people in the fold is really what, you know, we're focused on right now at this time.
I think one metric that hasn't been discussed that CMA really looks into is TV ratings at a really intense level. So with TV properties that we have our marks associated with or that are competitors, we want to try to understand their ratings and look at those by demos to understand who's really driving eyeballs to listenership. But for our properties, we're diving into minute by minutes. And so a lot of TV ratings, even in the sports space, you can see when is what's driving interest and where does the interest drop. And what we do is we take those ratings and we overlay them by using some really sophisticated survey methodologies to look at dial testing, if you will. So we can show the program with fans. They watch it, they can tell us if they like, they don't like, and we dive into understanding why. And now we can shape our content to be more aligned with their actual interest. So outside of things that don't relate to sports in terms of streaming and album and song sales, I think the TV rating piece really does. And it's understanding the specificity of it and when those moments then ripple into social media reach and ripple down into other consumption habits.
No, that's great. The my next question was kind of about, we talked about what makes success now and what you all are doing at your organizations, but taking a step back and kind of thinking what's next in the space, I think is always interesting. So if you kind of pull out the crystal ball a little bit, where do you think this field is going? What do you think the next big thing in this space is? What does this look like a year, 2 years, 3 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously can't say for sure, but pulling out my crystal ball and seeing, what I can do, I would say, I think, it's trending towards a lot of this very hyper personal stuff, right? Being able to target a specific person, not even just a segment, right? People are wanting to get even more specific than a segment. And I think, being someone in that space, I think it's awesome, super creepy, but awesome, right? And it's supposed to be, my sister will have conversations of like, I swear my phone is listening to me. I'm like, yeah, it is. Like, it actually is. When you download these apps, there's, it's in the fine print. But one of the things that I think will be really interesting is going to be the issue of privacy. I mean, you've already started to see it, but where that, how, what that's going to evolve into and how that's going to turn out, because it's definitely sensitive, people listening in and getting all that data and collecting it when you don't realize it. So I think that's going to end up being one of the big, I don't want to say issue, but one of the big things coming up next.
Yeah, I completely agree there. I think, predictive automation, all those things that are buzzwords right now and that teams are starting to latch onto, I think those are only going to proliferate, down the road. They're just going to become more accessible to clubs to use and use well. Staffs are going to continue to expand probably from an analytics group, because more departments are going to use them, more are going to have the ability in the projects to have more headcount, and so that's going to be great for all the students out there that want to be in that space. And I think the big thing is just understanding that there's just going to be so much technology out there, and just being able to, again, go back to, how can you learn? How can you be able to put yourself in a position to, quickly understand different vendors and platforms and things like that, because that's what it's all going to be. There's going to be so many vendors there that help you kind of be successful, and you just have to be able to, be curious and start driving the ship.
And that plethora of vendors, Michael, right, can almost like lead to this numbing feeling of like, what do you do? Yeah. And I think sometimes when you try to look in the future, the thing that really screams out to me from what Michelle and Michael are talking about is just how cluttered this landscape is going to continue to be, whether that's data privacy issues, but think about all the clubs that are in UCF and CMA's position where we're brand new into this. And now if we're all starting to do this type of marketing, it doesn't become unique. It doesn't become special anymore. And I think we worry about that now, even in the COVID area. Every single company is telling you how they're dealing with it, and it's making you less sticky. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge we face. But I get really excited for two types of technology. One is kind of blockchain starting to become more mainstream and easier to touch, where we can actually track down to the sole source of like ticketing. So I know the bankruptcy of some of these secondary vendors on the ticketing marketplace is quite scary, but it could provide an opportunity for us on the live event space to start to really hone in on what's the best technology solution for our end user. And the other piece is artificial intelligence that can actually be implemented on small and large scales. So I think IBM Watson tends to rule the day on what it could look like for Fortune 100 companies. But even at CMA, we've started using a company called Satisfy Labs. And it's a really simple click-to-chat AR interface that takes a team where we don't have anybody designated to customer service on a day-to-day, and it allows us to do simple things. So I think we're going to find ways in more intuitive situations in the next 12 to 18 months for trying to use technology to service our customer, not from an outbound, but almost from an inbound approach as well. So I get really excited about that.
And before I kick it over to Jeff for the next question, I wanted to follow up on two of those things, and especially for students who are looking for places to carve out in the space. I think Michelle's point about privacy is super important. Keel knows I've been kind of thrust into the data protection role at our company. There's tons of stuff going on in Europe and other countries and certain states in the United States. That's just going to continue to flood. There's a lot out there, and anything that frankly lawyers can make so much money off of, there's going to be a lot of positions to deal with that. And how do you manage the data the right way? How do you protect it? How do you delete it when consumers decide they want to? So I think that's really kind of a space that has an opportunity. And the other ones I think is blockchain. If you can kind of get your head around that. Everybody talks about it's very buzzy at the moment, but there's going to be a desire for people who understand that and can act on that coming up. So I think that's a really good thing for students to kind of say, hey, is there a niche I can find here? I think those things are pretty important. So I'll kick it over to Dr. Porter.
Mark, all great points. And I think Mr. Ferris, you started off with this conversation, but I want to kick it to Michelle first so how does data-driven decisions now change or adjust in the area of the post-COVID apocalypse? So what has happened now, in your day-to-day, or can you see moving forward that everything that we've done before now changes and they're looking at data in a different manner? So I'm interested to see what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, so specifically for college athletics, and I know all of you guys obviously know this, not having a football season would be huge. So huge in a very bad way, right? So, this is one of those times that I am very thankful for our leadership and definitely not envious of anyone that has to make those decisions, right? But our job and my job is to be able to give them the data and the information that they need to really be informed to make the best decision for everybody to be successful. So obviously for, in terms of ticket sales, that's one that we've hit on a bunch. That's one that's definitely going to change. And I don't know how exactly, but that's one that we have to, keep an eye on if that's not going to be one of the major sources of revenue, or what does that look like if you have to have social distancing in the stadium and so you're only using so much of the capacity. So all those different models, kind of forecasting that I think one of you guys brought up, that's all, going to be huge for us getting ready to come into that post-COVID stuff.
Yeah, but Michelle, I mean, it's really interesting to see, because you mentioned how social distancing is going to possibly come into play, and you have the Greater Orlando Sports Commission bringing all of these teams together from this area, but it's not just happening here; it's happening in every city across America and internationally too. Jeff, you've experienced with the Olympics, and I think everyone's trying to figure out that new normal, right, and what that means. And what I want to throw this back to, because what you hit on really plays into an activity we did in class. So it was actually the day that I believe, Mark, you came to guest lecture when we still were in person. We had every student take a different role within the community with the upcoming idea that they don't know what was going to happen, but they knew that COVID was a thing, but it was nowhere near where it was now. And so one person was a leader of the organization, another was the mayor, another was, the legal, the PR, the player, the athlete, et cetera there. So so with that, what you said is that all of those people that the students were thinking from their perspective were leaning on people like you, the three of you, for data to understand how to make decisions, right? So the health advisors across the country are leaning on big data, on trends and models on what's going to happen, so that they can give their advice. And then after that, then everyone else has to lean on the rest of the data to see how to make it from there. So I love the point that you brought up, and I wanted to bring it full circle with something we had done in class. So Michael Rust.
Yeah, I think for us and our standpoint, I think there's two big areas that we're going to be focusing on, in the immediate future, as far as, from a data piece. One of them is Michael Farris's old hat. It's going to be the survey piece and the research standpoint. So we're going to be doing a ton of work with our season ticket holders, just understanding where they're at from, their attitudes, their perceptions, and just kind of what their thoughts and feelings are from a COVID standpoint. And then, broadening that out to just the Nashville DMA in general. So just, again, understanding what that looks like. So when we have games and concerts and those types of things, when that normal comes back, we can understand what we can expect and try to forecast and make the best decisions possible for our building and for our fans. And then secondarily, I think a big thing that's going to grow is going to be the corporate partnerships data. And this has always been a little bit further behind in the analytics space, just from the standpoint that it does require a lot of vendors to do, and the data is messy and it's kind of all over the place. And, there's not one exact science to evaluating signage and assets and those types of things. But I think that, teams can still, generate value for their partners in this time through unique ways of all the different, Twitch simulations for video games and all those types of rebroadcast and things. Partners are still engaging in that, and teams and brands can still lift up their corporate partners. So driving that value back to them, that's a huge thing to just engage, not only with your fans from the survey standpoint, but engaging with your corporate partners. That's going to be the two things that I think teams are really going to be focusing on here in kind of the immediate future.
Mm-hmm.
I think from our end, as a music genre, we've started to realize what data we don't have that we need. And so in the past month and a half, we've made a major effort to actually just look at how many jobs and sectors were impacted within the music industry. Quite honestly, CMA didn't have that data. So we had to start from scratch and did a lot of hand-in-hand combat to start to come up to a number to say, what's our true impact? And then what does the revenue and cash flow look like for our industry over the next 12, 18, 24 months? And what does that waterfall down to? And I think the metrics we're going to start to lean into is what really is the fan development cycle in music. If you just lost live events as a complete opportunity to engage and interact with your consumer, you have publishers now delaying albums from coming out because their marketing campaigns are not going out to true fruition, and they're worried about having bombs. So you're starting to look at what eyeballs are being driven to virtual at-home experiences and that type of content. And is that legitimately translating into social media impressions, to social media reach, and to sales and streaming? So I think we really are starting to look more intensely at the revenue flow. And I think Rust hit it nail on the head. I think corporate partnerships ends up being the real enigma here, because you have a lot of corporations that are taking money away from all of their spending in sport and entertainment and sponsorship. And then you have a lot that are leaning in, and trying to find the opportunity to figure out how those that are leaning in can still stay attached and create authentic moments is going to help us with fan development. From a sport angle, I'll just lob a thought to students and to the panel here that I think it's also a really good time for us to look at data and maybe the ultra aggressiveness that we've taken with ticket pricing and ticket marketing over the past few years, because we've been in this bubble period of growth. And I think with the ticketing industry somewhat kind of popping, I think it's a really good time for us to really understand how live events and sports are prioritized within the consumer set. And have they been spending more from us than they should have been? And do we actually need to come up with new creative revenue flows to replace those dollars in the next few seasons?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, the point you brought up around sponsorship. And sponsorship really centers around being able to show the value that you have in the relationship that you have with fans or your demographic and your audience to be able to align the two brands together. But, the question I have next really is around geofencing and location data. We've had a previous guest speaker, not this semester, but last semester in class. His name is Jonathan Faulkner from iHeartMedia. He leads their digital team. And, he talks about how, apps are able, and you mentioned this, Michelle, can track you, but not only just from a listening, but locationally where you are. So I want to ask you, how are you leveraging, or how do you see people leveraging in the future this location data? Because this is a hot topic right now, especially around social distancing, right? And tracking where people are going.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting point to think of from the social distancing perspective. I'll start, just from how you can leverage that data in general, from the kind of basic way in terms of advertising. I'll give a quick example. Basically, any advertising that we would run, everything that everything that you're paying for, you make sure, okay, who's my audience? Where is it going to go to? I don't want to say waste, but if I'm trying to sell tickets, right? Like the example that I gave of that guy out in Oregon that bought a shirt, doesn't really make sense for me to spend money on him to try to get him to fly out to Orlando for a game, right? So I want to make sure that because I think another thing with data is how efficient you can be. So being able to spend your money as wisely and efficiently as possible, making sure that advertising is going to people who are most likely to see it. When television first came around and it's this mass media and you can hit so many people, and, obviously there's something to say about getting a bigger audience, but what if that audience doesn't pay attention? It goes one in one ear and out the other. So I think that's one of the most important and, easily utilized things with that location data that sometimes people aren't using as efficiently as they maybe should be or could be. So that's one that I try to be sensitive about, because when I get things that are Illinois specific, I'm always like, man, you just wasted that much money on me because I don't live in Illinois anymore. I'm not going to come buy a ticket, right? It would have made sense when I was there, but maybe not anymore. And then from the social distancing thing, I mean, you read articles about how people are going to use that then to say, oh, you were within this distance of someone else. And it's almost kind of scary, right? That's where I think the privacy issue comes in again. But you can also use it, obviously, to your advantage and being able to give some good messaging and some heartening messaging and stuff like that. I think you can use on a localized level.
Yeah, I think those are all good points. The location data is tricky, right? It can be used for, tons of advantages, of just making sure that, again, it goes back to how well you know your fans and making sure that you're engaging with them and where they want to be and really in an authentic manner. I think from a practitioner standpoint on kind of, the club side of the table or the team side of the table, it's hard to work with a lot of that data sometimes, right? It's challenging. It's difficult or near impossible to tie that back to an individual person. And then, if you are, there's the privacy issue and how do you, kind of intertwine that with all of your other sources that you're playing with. So if I'm just talking through it from a practitioner standpoint, that can be challenging. And it's, that's more of, in my opinion, down the spectrum of the jogging, running stages of advancement. And so I don't know that a lot of teams are kind of in that space yet. It requires a large investment, but it's definitely, going back to where things are going to be in the future, it's only going to continue to catch up and abilities are going to be there for clubs to utilize that more frequently and in a more precise manner.
Yeah, and although you're not necessarily doing that yourselves, you might be leveraging the data of partners like iHeartMedia or many others to target those people. So yeah,
100%.
Okay.
We lean quite a bit into geofencing and the beacon technologies for our festival that happens in Nashville. We have a 4-day music festival that happens. It tends to happen one of the first weekends in June, and our app provider actually sets up a couple hundred beacons across the city of Nashville. And then we also put geofences where we're interested, where travel might take place or where we want to send messages. Some of this is putting the cart before the horse, if you will, because we've been doing this geofencing and beacon technologies for a couple of years in terms of understanding reporting and attendance at certain parts of our festival. And so we can start to understand what's important, what's popularity, what times from a capacity angle for our operations team makes sense. But this past year, we started using it more for messaging. And so if they're by X sponsor, we can send X message, which has been really fantastic. And we even use that for day of surveying methodology. So hopefully we're going to feed that back in the data warehouse. That's a really hyper event specific area. But we've talked about geolocation strategies looking at live events throughout country music. Like one of the ideas that we've shopped, we never went to, is what if you put geofences on all the venues? And when there's country shows, you activate it to drive them back to country playlists. So you activate it to a more of a national campaign to drive fan engagement. And so I think we'll look at it from a way that if we're a national brand, how can we touch more people in an authentic way and relate to an event that they went to where it's not necessarily creepy, but almost looks as a service, like Michelle's like happy moments with those geofences locally. I think that's where you could see CMA maybe going with those types of plays.
Well, guys, we really appreciate your time, and it looks like we have time for one more question, but I'm going to try to weave the one into two questions and see if we can get you guys to look right into the camera and answer these two specific questions for the students. The first one is, what advice do you have for the students who are trying to break into the industry? And the second question is, where can you get the best experience? And where you're talking about, where can I get the best experience? Where can I get the best hands-on learning to develop some of those hard skills that we were talking about earlier?
So for your first question, talking about what advice I have, I think I'll do two kind of quick parts. So first part I would say is don't be afraid to ask questions. I say that to anybody basically in any industry, and anyone who's worked with me knows that I'm definitely not afraid to ask questions. I think that's the way that you learn. And like we've talked about a few different times, curiosity is what solves those problems, right? And that's what we're trying to do here. The other thing, maybe a little bit more easily applicable, would be don't be afraid to go do some of these certifications and stuff on your own. I had some interns go through a program with me this past year. I had them get Google Analytics certified, Google Ads certified. Tableau has stuff I'm going through right now. Granted, you have to pay for that one. But some of these things, those are the little skills and the technical skills, right, that we talked about beforehand that can kind of help get you to stand out and get the attention of the people that are hiring. And then, obviously you go from there and being able to take on the job. And then where you can get the best kind of experience. I think that honestly, it comes from the right type of mentor. So having a grad school program like this that these guys are going through, and you're doing an awesome job bringing in people from the industry to be able to talk to people like that. Sometimes it's just having these conversations and starting it out. I think one of you guys mentioned that you kind of gotten to where you are through networking, and I think anybody that's been in the business for a while would say the same. I don't want to fall back on it's only who you know, because I'm a big believer that that's not necessarily the case. I didn't know anybody before I got my job at the Bengals, and same with the University of Cincinnati. But once you get that foot in the door, and once you get that, get some of that experience, some of that hands-on, it's what you make of it, right? So you're not going to get, if you do get a recommendation to get another job and then you stink, then obviously you're not going to get recommended to go any farther. So definitely take advantage of those and just always do your best work.
Absolutely. And the networking piece that was me. I mean, when I was in grad school at DeVos, I made it my goal to reach out to 2 or 3 people every single week, alumni of the program, and just kind of learn about their journey. And so, these guys doing these podcasts for you guys as students is huge, and just learning about, our journeys, how we got here, what we do, that's a huge thing. And hopefully you have more questions off of that and you can dig deeper on the things that we've been talking about, because that's how, you find, the niche that you're interested in, or something we say might spark an idea, or, we might give you another contact to reach out to based on what you tell us. So using, us as resources now, that's the big thing to really help you learn. And then, from the standpoint of, the other question, I think it's, some of the biggest things is sometimes it's hard to get a internship or experience with analytics or data or strategy or something like that in the job title, but that shouldn't stop you from going out on the internet, finding a data source that you think is interesting and working on it. If you're interested in statistics, you can find all kinds of stuff out there to do regression work or anything like that, or you can build your own data sample. Like Michelle mentioned, throw that, grab a Tableau desktop or Tableau public and visualize that. Do all those things yourself, develop your own projects. And then that's just as important to, folks on my side of the table who are looking for students that are interested in analytics, that you took that initiative to just kind of craft your own project. That's just as valuable to me as any type of, learning that you could get on the job.
I think Michelle and Michael really absolutely killed it with the best experience piece. That you can easily go and get your hands dirty today doing something that you're passionate about with data and showing it through some type of visualization tool or communicating it regardless of your job, and reaching out to other people to start talking about that. But I'll talk a little bit more about maybe advice to break into the industry. I've been able to talk with a lot of students when I was with Aspire and even now within the music genre. And I think it's really important for students to be flexible and to be patient. And it's really hard to be patient. But I get to meet a lot of students who say, I really want to work for the NFL. I really want to work in pro soccer. And that's phenomenal. But if you're stuck on working for a certain type of sport or certain type of organization, you might have a challenge getting your foot one step further. So focus on what the job is. How can you get skill sets for that? So you might start in minor league baseball, building databases by hand so you get an experience that's tangible, and then you can move on to the NFL or you can move on to the NHL. You'll get there if you map it out. Be flexible, be patient, get your hands dirty, and you'll get there.
That concludes our episode and this semester's podcast. Join us for future topics like sustainability, augmented reality, virtual reality, and the future of streaming media.